everyone. You're at the table with Susan and Lucy. I'm Lucy Caluti, and I'm delighted today that as our special guest, we have Anthony Scaramucci. First, let me say, Anthony, and to our audience, that we are the American Italian Food Coalition. That's 450 Italian companies that export food to the United States, affordable and quality food like coffee, pasta, biscuits, wafers, and others. And so the coalition, and you're certainly welcome to refer to it as the coalition, is so glad that you're here today so that we can have this wonderful conversation. And now I'd like to turn it over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Lucy. Well, I love Anthony Scaramucci, and I am so pleased that he could find time to be with us today. Now, when I say find time, Anthony, everybody I think knows about your stint at the White House, that you're a manager and founder of Skybridge Capital, author of 4 books, I think, or maybe more by now. You also started a podcast called Mooch FM, and I think you have been traveling around the United States, if not around the world, speaking out on behalf of cryptocurrency.
You did my mom write it for you, Suze? You could tell me, right? But first of all, thank you. It's a very big honor to be with you guys. And when Lucy was regaling the coalition's food, I'm thinking of my Nana, because when I was growing up as a kid, basically that was in her house. And just to make you guys really laugh, every Italian wedding, she would come back with those colored sugared almonds, and you know what I'm talking about.
Jordan almonds, yes.
They were wrapped in that little gauze, and they had the little thing on it, and of course I used to eat those as well. So I am probably like you guys. I grew up in an Italian family, which was very steeped in the Italian culture, and I try to get back to Italy a couple times a year, but listen, my grandmother got here in 1923. And she was a maid. She couldn't get a job. They said no Italians need apply at certain storefronts, and there was some levels of discrimination back then, and there is today even. But I remember so fondly her wisdom, her love, and the way she cooked all the foods that you guys are importing, and. Like when I go to like a hotel, I'm like, all right, I got to make sure I leave a big tip here. This could be somebody's grandmother, right?
I agree 100%.
My grandmother was actually there. And so one of the things that we learn in our culture is obviously to treat everybody with dignity and kindness, and to recognize that each of us are equals before God. And it's super important for me. And so I think that's the reason why you and I are close. And so I'm delighted to be on.
So Amy, where was your grandmother from in Italy?
So my mom's parents were from a small town in Campania called Volterra, which was in the Provincia di Avellino. So it was up in the mountains. The population there was about 3,000 people. She came to the United States at the age of 18. My grandfather, actually, his parents left the town in 1900. He was born in the United States. And he emigrated back to Italy for a period of time. So, he spent probably the first 10 years of his life in Italy, even though he was born in the United States. Literally, as a newborn, they moved him back to Italy. So it's just a sort of an interesting story. He was actually a U.S. citizen born here. And my grandparents from my dad's side are from Umbria. They're from a town near Perugia called Gualdo de Torino. Where they named me an honorary citizen. I think one of the benefits of getting fired from the White House, you get pretty famous, So the mayor of the town of my grandfather's from named me an honorary citizen.
That's pretty cool.
That was a lot of fun. I was there last year to accept that ceremonial thing, which was fun.
That's so neat. As a matter of fact, my family and I are going to Perugia this summer.
Yeah, it was beautiful, a beautiful place. It was obviously up by St. Francis, is the beautiful cathedral.
Yeah.
But as most Italians know, I did take the Ancestry.com DNA. Apparently, I'm 17% Greek, and of course, when I told my mother that, that's got to be from your father's side of the family. Don't you love that? Don't you love these people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are few ethnicities that are as proud as the Italians. So I would just want to stay with your grandmother for just a bit because she said sounds like a hoot and a half. So she did a lot of cooking for you.
She had a lot of cooking. I was very close to her growing up. She was an extremely hard worker. And so, when I think about my days, there's really days filled with blessings. Even the day that I got fired from the White House, when I got my job at Goldman Sachs, I had just graduated from Harvard Law School. My father was a crane operator. He operated a crane out on Long Island for 42 years. And he was still working at the time. And he said to me, Anthony, I never want to hear you complain about your job. And I said, why is that, Dad? He said, well, you're indoors.
Yeah.
You're out of direct sunlight and there's no heavy lifting. And, he got up in the morning. I remember my mother putting his lunch pail in the refrigerator. He got up in the morning super early. He worked a full shift, came home early. But it was a very hard job out in the cold weather, hot and cold weather, and that was my grandmother. My grandmother started out as a maid. She then actually got a job with my Aunt Rena at the local high school where the two of them worked in the kitchen. Okay. This high school, Schreiber High School in Port Washington, literally while they were working there, it was like it was like an Italian restaurant. I mean, these people, the students, I have, kids that are older than me, we're not kids anymore, but I have 65-year-old guys come up to me and say, I went to that high school and your grandmother and your Aunt Rena was cooking the food back there. I mean, this is like the only place.
Who likes cafeteria food?
Right, exactly. Who likes high school cafeteria food? But my aunt and my grandmother were back there cooking, and she had that job. That was her last job before she retired.
That's a great story. One quick question on this, and then we'll get to what Anthony Scaramucci is doing now. You have a favorite food that she used to make for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's still my favorite food. Raviolis with her homemade meatballs in that old. There's no other way to describe it, but it was that very simple food. It's sort of what Lucy was saying. This food coming from Italy is affordable.
Yeah.
In some cases, you could say it was peasant food, and in peasant food is sometimes the most delicious and the most simple. My family, you could run our entire diet off of the olive, the tomato, the grape, which would include wine and vinegar, and obviously wheat and pasta and things like that. But her signature thing for me was the homemade raviolis that she made herself with the meatballs. And of course, she baked her own Italian bread though too. So I mean, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, that's the reason why I'm never going to be thin, Suze. I mean,
oh my gosh, you are thin.
No, but I'm just saying, there's no chance. I mean, you're always going to have. You can't. I'm not giving up the carbs. Okay, I'll give up the carbs when I'm in the casket. Okay, we're not giving up the carbs. I mean, how are you gonna grow up Italian like that?
Totally.
Like when I go up to Rayo's, I mean, I'm like, oh yeah, bring me the
bread.
Bring me the penne. Yeah, bring me the bread.
Dip the bread in the sauce.
100%.
Yes, I know.
100%.
All right, let's go. Now I'm hungry. And looking for good meatballs. I have found that a lot of times good meatballs, like my grandmother used to make, are very hard to find.
So let me ask you this though: she put them in the sauce to cook them, or
sometimes.
What did she do?
No, she would fry them first.
Fried them, yeah. That's what my grandmother.
I like.
Yeah, that's what my grandmother did. You got to make them crunchy on the outside a little bit.
On the outside, because they were almost as good out of the sauce as they were in the sauce.
100%. I can still taste the meatballs. I can still smell her kitchen. Like when I think about growing up as a kid. And by the way, we grew up in a blue collar, middle class neighborhood. And, you think about America, how special this place is. Each of these people were leaving Italy for various reasons, primarily a lack of work or economic opportunity. They came to America and they were able to build something for themselves and their families, maintain their cultural identity. I mean, this is just an amazing place. We have to preserve the idea of that for future immigrants, obviously.
Agreed.
And, of course, when I got into Harvard, she had already passed, but my mother thought it was Hartford Law School. She had no clue, okay, because none of these people read, So my mother was like, okay, so you're going to school in Connecticut? I'm like, no, Ma.
Harvard.
Why would they call it Hartford Law School if it's not in Hartford, Connecticut? I'm like, Ma, No, it's not called that.
My
But
goodness.
anyway, I know you two appreciate that. I mean, that's how I grew up, and it was a special time in America.
Yeah.
It was an aspirational working class family, and you know, we have to figure out ways to maintain that. Unfortunately, some of these families today, due to the cost of living, have become economically desperational, and we need to of course fix that for the country.
Well said. Well said. Now, I know these are some of the things that you do discuss on a weekly basis under Mooch FM, which is, something that you have started fairly recently.
Yeah, it's a fun podcast for me. So a group of people called podcast partners. They came to me and said, "We'll set it up. We'll run your production, and we'll help you curate guests." I think we've done about 85 podcasts
Wow.
now. It's an eclectic podcast. So sometimes we're doing sports, but sometimes we're doing politics. I like interviewing a lot of authors. I'm a big reader. And so I've interviewed everybody from Daniel Silva and Ken Follett on the spy thrillers to biographers like Andrew Roberts, who's written about Winston Churchill, or Charles III, his most recent biography. And I try to keep it real and try to make it entertaining, because it looks like, from a demographic perspective, we have a lot of young listeners, a lot of students, and recent graduates from college and high school. So for me, it's a lot of fun for me. I think we get several 100,000 downloads, unique downloads a month.
Oh.
And so I try to keep it fresh. But but here's the thing, some of it's cryptocurrency related as well, because obviously I've moved my business in that direction.
Mhm.
And I just think it's very important that we embrace the technologies that are upon us. I don't want to be that old fuddy-duddy
Yeah.
who is throwing rocks at the horseless carriage, telling you that the horseless carriage is a fad, and I'm going to stick with my horse and carriage. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Well, I totally appreciate that. And someday when we're not doing this, you can explain to me NFTs, because I can read about them all the time and I don't understand them.
So let me just spend 30 seconds on this, because I think you'll appreciate this, because we're of the same vintage. Okay. I can show you something that's made out of cardboard. It was produced in the mid-century, the 20th century. It has 4-color process ink on it.
Yeah.
It was produced in 1952. One side of it is Mickey Mantle. The other side of it is his stats from the minor league. And of course, this is the Mickey Mantle rookie baseball card.
Mm-hmm.
And this piece of sports memorabilia sold last year for $5.2 million. And so you say to yourself, wow, why would somebody pay that much money for a piece of cardboard? Well, the truth of the matter is it's unique. It represents something about America, Americana, the culture, the Yankees. Mickey Mantle was the All-American boy that came to New York to play center field for the Yankees. And there's not many of them because of the scarcity of it. People are willing to pay a lot of money for it. The same thing with a piece of art like a Picasso or something like that. And so it's hard for us to understand, because the three of us have lived in the real world where we have real objects in front of us, but our children and our grandchildren are living in a digital world. Where they may spend 5 or 6 hours a day on a computer.
Yeah, sure.
It could be a Zoom call, but it could also be Call of Duty. And so what happens is, if you have a digital expression of art, they think it's as valuable as I would think that Mickey Mantle piece of cardboard is, right? And then, of course, there's a group of people that are like, I would never pay that for a piece of cardboard. But and yet, I predict that NFT, that digital artistic expression that has its own fingerprint, and it's an original, will go up in value, as will the Mickey Mantle card. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I was in Paris over the weekend, and I got the opportunity to observe the Mona Lisa, which I try to get to every time I'm in Paris. And it's one of the most beautiful paintings in the world for so many different reasons. But what is it really? It's on a piece of wood. It's acrylic paint, glass dust powder, and it's a picture. And obviously, you and I could buy a picture of the Mona Lisa. We could buy a pretty effective replica of the Mona Lisa. And yet there is the original Mona Lisa encased in bulletproof glass in the Louvre. And of course, it's the most famous and probably the most priceless painting in the world. Point being is, there's a world moving away from us that believes that these digital artistic expressions are going to be valuable as well. And I guess that's the closest I can get you to understanding what it's about.
I got to spend more time with you, Anthony. But right now, I'm going to toss it over to Lucy.
Well, thank you. That was fascinating, and thank you. Anthony, you'll recall when we first began this conversation, I was talking about the 450 companies, the Italian companies that export affordable and quality food to the United States. We're able to do that because of strong trade relations between Italy and the United States. And we want to continue that. We have such a sharing of cultures, as you've so well pointed out today, a sharing of an understanding and love of the Mediterranean diet and the importance of moderation in enjoying our wonderful dinners. We look at trade as so critical to this relationship. And I thought maybe I'd just throw it out to you to say something about the importance of these bilateral relations and trade.
Well, listen, I mean, it's obviously the most important thing. And I think we're up against it a little bit because of our politics right now. There's some populism in our politics and there's some American nativism. But if you step back and you think about the world long term, let's go to the very famous Italian economist, David Ricardo. What did David Ricardo say? He basically said that no nation can produce what it needs at the lowest cost by itself. It would need to seek trade with other nations. And so David Ricardo was the real founder, the George Washington, if you will, of global trade. The idea that we needed some level of globalization to make our economies more efficient, to share the diversity, not just the cultural diversity, but the technical diversity, the product diversity around the world. So I'm a very big proponent of free trade for so many different reasons, but the main one is the interconnectivity. Certainly, it will grow our economy. Certainly, we need to avail ourselves of free trade. But I find that when nations get closer from an economic perspective, they get closer from a diplomatic perspective, and then there's less likelihood of conflict. And so I just want to take you guys back about 80 years to the end of the Second World War. It was very important for the United States. When we started GATT, which ultimately became the World Trade Organization, the WTC, it was the General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs. And what did the United States do? We made sure that a whole host of countries could sell their services, their goods and services here in the United States, relatively untariffed. We did that because we wanted to create rising living standards around the world, but we also did that because we wanted to promote that diversity and that interconnectivity. So for me, this is a hallmark of where we need to go for our future. I don't think our people, I don't want to get too political on this podcast, but I don't think our people fully understand it, and I don't think they fully understand the economic benefits associated with it. And because there's some job uncertainty out there and there's some nativism and fear of foreigners, if you will, we have to dispel the myths associated with globalism and free trade. So I'm all for it. And I would like to spend more time, frankly, explaining it to my fellow citizens so that they can reduce their fear and embrace it more. And so listen, it's not just Italian food. It's so many different things that we benefit from. And frankly, the Americans should also have the right and the ability to sell our goods and services elsewhere as well.
With Italian Americans being such a productive and well-known part of our country, our great country, sometimes we're the best people to talk about this and how important the relationship is between our two countries. I want to turn my attention to something that's really lots of fun. And that's, I don't know whether you know this, but I was a Major League Baseball executive for many years, worked with Commissioner Seelig. And I know, and even though we're not supposed to be partial, I am a devoted Mets fan.
Oh, I'm just trying to hug you through the screen here. You and I have had shared pain, Luce. Shared pain.
Year so far, right? I mean, this year our wonderful Mets are 19-5, and we're just looking real good. I see your Citi Field sign over there.
Yeah, Yeah, I had that made. So my office is 12 and a half miles from the stadium. For a period of time, I owned a small piece of the Mets. I bought it alongside of Jim McCann from 1-800-Flowers when the Wilpons had the Madoff issue. That was about 10 years ago. We sold our shares to Steve Cohen, but Jim and I also own the Mike Piazza jersey. Remember the home run that Mike hit after 9/11? And we have that at the 9/11 museum. So we wanted to make sure that jersey never left the public
Special.
display, if you will. But I'm a long-standing Met fan. My wife is a Yankee fan. She grew up in Rockland County. Yankees are off to a very good start as well, as you know. These two teams have
In a row.
11 in a row. We've got the two best teams in baseball right now, which I'm an admirer of the Yankees. I know Randy Levine really well, but Steve Cohen is a very close friend. We have money in his fund, know him a long time. Maybe we can all go to a game together. I would love that. I built a tequila bar in my suite. My suite's not to be the name dropper that I actually am, but I'll do a little name dropping. I'm right down the suite row there from Jerry Seinfeld. So some guys have wine bars. I built a tequila bar. Hopefully the two of you guys will come with me to a game and we'll serve some tequila.
That sounds like an amazing afternoon, though I am a Yankee fan also. But for tequila, I'll switch sides.
Staten Island. Let me tell you something. I will say this, and you guys are New Yorkers, and you'll appreciate this. I used to have this love-hate relationship with the Yankees and other New York sports teams. So if I was a Jet fan, I would rail on the Giants, or a Met fan, I would rail on the Yankees. After 9/11, I made a solemn promise to myself that if a New York team was playing anywhere in this country, I was rooting for that New York team. Now, I am a Met fan. Of course, I want them to kick the pants off the Yankees. And I know my Yankee friends want to see the Yankees, which they've obviously been demolishing us since the interleague started, the interleague competition. But for me, I will never root against a New York sports team again. And that's, of course, happened after September 11th.
For you, Anthony, I so agree with you, and I do the same thing. We're all proud New Yorkers, and we're proud Italian Americans. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us today.
Oh, it's big pleasure. Anytime you give me a chance to talk about my Nana, I'm like ready. I'm all in. Thank you guys. And
thanks for sharing Nana stories.
But the key thing is, like, when you think about our culture, it's a family culture. It's centered around the family. It's centered around that commitment to love each other despite whatever. Listen, there's an unconditionality of love of family, which I think is important for people. We don't always have to get it 100% right. Each of ourselves are flawed and imperfect, but it's important to stay committed to each other. And I love that about the culture I grew up in.
Well said. And on that note, have a wonderful day. We're very proud of you.
Well, it's good to be here.
Thanks for being with us.